Good evening. My name is Alexandra Hunt. I'm speaking to you all from Philadelphia on land originally inhabited by indigenous Lenape people. I'm a public health researcher, grassroots activist, and progressive organizer. This year, a pandemic put unprecedented stress on our public health and economic systems. Police violence wreaked fear and grief in Black communities across the nation, murdering George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, Walter Wallace Jr., Ahmaud Arbery, and countless others. We lost some of our greatest champions of social justice, congressional representative and civil rights activist John Lewis, and Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Yet in the wake of grief and systemic failure, the progressive movement mobilized. We brought a renewed energy and purpose to the ongoing fight for justice. Black Lives Matter organizers led the largest racial justice protests this country has seen since the 1960s, igniting national conversations on white supremacy. Progressive candidates shook the establishment, challenging incumbents in Congress, the Senate, and state-level positions across the country. Grassroots organizers registered unprecedented numbers of voters, and BIPOC voters turned out in key battleground cities to flip swing states like Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Georgia blue in the most important election of our lifetime. Tonight, we are gathered as a progressive community to heal from 2020, celebrate the work of tireless activists, and envision the future of our movement. We've got an impressive lineup of progressive movers and shakers from across the nation. Cultural advocate and Lakota tribe member Lawrence Swally will facilitate a session of healing. Progressive candidates Jen Perlman, Eva Putsova, Zena Sasaki, and Zainab Mosini will join me for a moderated panel on lessons they learned from the campaign trail. And we'll toast the new year with political activists Tim Sanders, Elijah Manley, Akshita Varma, and Lauren Ashcraft. Feel free to pose questions to our guests and keep a lookout for follow-up information. Without further delay, I'm honored to welcome cultural advocate Lawrence Swally to guide our community in the process of healing from the trauma of 2020.
I greet you all with a warm heart and a heartfelt handshake. My name is Lawrence Swally. I'm speaking to you from Yellow Bear Canyon in Pine Ridge, South Dakota. And I'm a cultural advocate. I've been working with the CASA program, which is now called the Children's Justice Center, for over 10 years now. And we've been involved in trying to reduce violence against girls and women, indigenous girls and women on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation with the help of the Noble Foundation. And we've been successful in being able to keep our newly elected council representatives abreast on the changing the laws. And when we talk about changing the laws, we're specifically targeting proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt doesn't fare well for indigenous girls and women. And when we talk about justice, we talk about injustice on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation for these girls and these women. It's no justice. And we want to, again, remember all those who lost their lives to police brutality. But at the same time, we want to also recognize those who are fighting to bring injustice to the forefront. And before we begin, I lit some sage. We use sage to scare away the evil spirits because they don't like the way that it smells. And sometimes when we go throughout our lives and we don't carry spiritual protection, and most of the time we call that praying or creating a prayer or making a prayer. In our culture, we say, "Wamayon kayo," I mix my blood with creation. And our culture, the Lakota culture, and a lot of the indigenous cultures come from a matriarchal social construct in which the grandmothers were the ones who created the societies based on ceremony. And for the most part, our people on the reservations have lost touch with that concept. And so for the past 130 years or so, there's been concerted effort to destroy the matriarchal social construct. And the reason they destroyed the matriarchal social construct was because when the United States came to our territories and they wanted to speak to our leaders, they were shown to our grandmothers. And because white men come from a society where they're king of the castle, they didn't want to have to answer to all these old women in our tribal nations. And so they're the ones who created the concept of a chief. And so from that point on, then we have hereditary leaders, headmen, spiritual leaders. But because of the assimilation process, the orientation that we require with our children or young adults is absent. And so when we talk about injustice, our lands were forcibly taken over and our people were forced onto square plots of land called reservations. Prior to being forced on the Pine Ridge Reservation, we defeated the United States in 1876, called the Battle of the Little Bighorn. And that secured our right as a sovereign entity on this land. And the United States signed agreements stating that as long as they use our resources, they will provide annuities to our people. The first annuity in 1868 was that every Indian male who becomes head of household shall receive 160 acres of land. Number two, as long as the United States continues to use our resources, they will provide to us housing, healthcare, education, and welfare. So through the years, including the 1900s, when they made Indians United States citizens in 1925, called the Snyder Act, they lumped the Indians under the welfare structure so they didn't have to pay that annuity. And today, a lot of congressmen call these entitlements. These are not entitlements. These are annuities. Even today, when we look at the United States with regard to its electrical grid, they continue to use our coal out of the Powder River country to furnace the United States of America. And under the US Constitution, it states that treaties made with Indian nations are the supreme law of the land. It also states that if the United States takes somebody's land, they have to give just and proper compensation to every individual member. That just and proper compensation never made it to the individual Indians, especially here on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And as a direct result, our people live in abject poverty. Now, when they live in abject poverty, combined with the government not wanting to provide housing anymore, then you have multiple families living in one home. And that breeds a lot of dysfunction and misconduct, especially sexual misconduct. So for many decades, our Indian girls and women endured sexual assault, sexual abuse, and they've never seen any justice. When we talk about injustice for our men, following Wounded Knee in 1890, the United States government showed our Indian men that they don't have a problem killing our women and children, and they were going to do it right in front of us. And they did, with Hotchkiss guns. So from that point forward, then they switched on the reservations. Our leadership was earned. A man would prove his spiritual integrity, strength, and commitment to provide a shield of protection for the woman, the children, the society as a whole. And they were given shirts by all of the women who would cut pieces of their hair and put it on the sleeves, all the way down the sides on the shirt. And when they presented that to this leader, then he was the itacha. He spoke for everybody. But today we have hereditary leadership. They don't have to earn that position. All they have to do is be able to speak a good topic. And if they have large families on reservations, then those are the ones that get elected, regardless of whether they're educated or not, regardless of whether they understand business, whether they understand policy, whether they understand justice. They're in there. And they go every 2 years, we have an election. And I want to mention something called previous condition of servitude, which was implemented after gold was discovered in the Black Hills and taken back to the East Coast. And that was following the Civil War, where they outlawed slavery. And they implemented this thing called previous condition of servitude, which said to the Black nation, if we expect you to live under our economic rule of law and with this gold, then we will provide you with 3 things. 1, we will allow you to come to the table and be a part of the discussion of the creation of laws that we're going to govern you by. 2, we're going to allow you to vote. And 3, we have to give you a job so that you can pay for any type of economic sanction that we might impose upon you. This is called previous condition of servitude. And more as we go into the future and money becomes scarce, then previous condition of servitude starts to fall by the wayside. Even how we look at how democracy is being chipped away, it's the same thing with economic rule of law. So on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, with regard to these things that I spoke of, they don't exist. And they're subjecting our individual members to conditions of slavery. And again, this is not Indian law. This is United States constitutional law. So for decades, our people have gone through many trials and tribulations. When they first put us on a reservation, and all of the men didn't want to be Christianized, wanted to hang on to the cultural ways, those men they sent off to mental institutions, never to be heard from again. The women were subject to beatings because men were allowed to have illicit cohabitation, including high amounts of alcoholism. So from 1900 to the late 1960s, our men, our boys, learned in the American way that might is right. And so they learned how to abuse their women, their children, their elderly. And they don't want to break that cycle because it's easy. They don't have to be held accountable for it. In a patriarchal social construct, the man reserves the exclusive ability to make excuses for everything that he thinks about, everything that comes out of his mouth, and everything that he does. Whereas in a matriarchal social construct, the grandmothers do not allow the boys and men to make excuses for anything, especially as it pertains to how you treat people, especially as it pertains to the taking of a human life. When we look at Wounded Knee, in the history books, it said it was a deaf, dumb mute who started the Battle of Wounded Knee. In fact, he was hard of hearing. His name was Black Coyote. He was a really big man. And he wasn't mute, and he certainly wasn't the dumb Indian. He got tired of the soldiers hitting him with their brand new rifles, the repeating rifles that they had bought with the gold from the Black Hills. And this man, he got tired of them hitting him in the back, on the shoulders, and the head. And he still had his rifle. So he stood up in front of everybody with his rifle and he said, I want everyone here to know that with this rifle, I have never taken the life of a human being. And as he was making this proclamation, then 3 or 4 soldiers jumped on top of him, but they couldn't get him down because he was such a big man. He turned one way, the soldier go flying. He turned the other way, the soldier go flying. If it wasn't such a tragedy, it would have been comical. Finally, 4 or 5 of them jumped on top of him, and the gun goes off, giving them the excuse they were looking for to start opening up on these women and children. So I want to remember all of our elders that have come forward in time and have been subject to a patriarchal methodology and subject to bullying, subject to intimidation, and subject to zero justice. So when we hear about the Black nation saying that there's 2 systems of justice, there's actually 3. One for the indigenous populations. And because they want our resources, they continue to hold us under duress. They continue to refuse to pay for the resources that they're taking. So I'm going to take you back to a time when our people had a relationship with the 4-legged, the race around the Black Hills. And at that time, all of the animal nations could speak the same language. And the 4-legged, after that race, because the 2-legged won, said to the 2-legged that from now on, when we see you coming, we will move out of the way. Kiu kampu. Maka aka kiu kampu. They're walking upon the earth. They're coming. Move out of the way. So that set forth our duty, our responsibilities as human beings to take care of this earth, the universe. And so I'm going to share a song with all of you. This one comes from one of my big brothers. His name is Cornell Conroy. And he provided the words to the song, and I provided the tune for the song. Makakile aka wana upelo, we're coming on the earth. Kiu kampu, get out of the way. Kapa wankayeya, the throwing of the ball. Today, we're going to have the dropping of the ball for New Year's. But in our culture, the women, when they had their maturity ceremony, actually caught this ball that was thrown to them by a grandmother. And when she caught the ball as a mature woman, then she accepted the role of keeping the laws of creation for the universe, the world, her nation and community, but especially her own home, upon her own hands. And so when we have someone like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, when she was asked, how many women would you like to see on the Supreme Court? She said 9. And that's a matriarchal social construct, because women are empathic, and they're compassionate, and they're loving and nurturing. And so we're trying to work here on the reservation to get our own people to understand this matriarchal social construct. It's better than a punitive measures that we've all been subject to. So I want to remember all those people that have stood up for justice around the world. And I'm going to share this song right now. wase uya ke ha hu no pa chung zai pai wa ko ye lo ya kyu ka po kyu ka po kyu ka po he wa na lo hai. Oh, with that, I want to let everybody know, especially young people, that from a cultural perspective, man was created through the stone. And so man carries a seed inside of him. And it's our job, our duty as men to create a shield, a spiritual shield of protection for our women and for our children and for our societies. Women come from the blood of creation or water. And so they carry an egg that they have to protect and create a shield of protection for. And so in this way, we're rooted to the earth. We have a purpose. The lightning people destroyed the dinosaur and the Neanderthal and created purpose and intelligence upon this earth. So I encourage everybody to get up and do something for yourself today so that you and your family can have a better tomorrow. In that way, then we're following God's law. And I want to caution everybody not to hang on to economic rule of law because money won't last forever. We need life skills training. You have to be able to know your environment, live in your environment, be a part of your environment, and make sure that all the elderly, the orphans, the handicapped, all the old veterans are all taken care of. So with that, I want to give thanks to everybody, and I want to wish everybody a happy new year and bring in this new year with gusto and make changes for people so that we can live better lives. Wo pila tanka chicha pilo. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence, for sharing your people's history and creating a space of healing and community. I know it's been an unbelievably hard year living on the reservation, and I thank you for sharing your culture's resilience and your vision for our future. Up next is activist and former Florida State Representative candidate Elijah Manley. At the oppressive age of 21, Elijah challenged the Democratic establishment in Florida, campaigning on a bold progressive platform to be the youngest person elected to office in the state of Florida. Here with a toast to the power of youth activism and state-level politics, Elijah Manley. Oh, you're muted, Elijah.
I never cease to amaze myself with muting myself in the mic. But hello, how are you doing, Alexandra? And hello to everybody. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. Thank you all for inviting me. And again, Happy New Year to everybody watching. I just want to start by saying I know this was a really tough and hard year for all of us. We saw tens of thousands of people die, so many others get sick through the COVID-19 pandemic. And it hasn't been an easy year for a lot of people, for most people, I'd say. There are a lot of people with empty seats at their table. They don't have a family member sitting at their table, a mother, father, son, daughter, auntie, grandmother, and they're hurting. They're hurting from those losses. So I just want to take the opportunity to just offer my love, also offer some positive energy to everyone out there who may be in the dark or who can't see the light. Just know that the light is there, and we have another opportunity to build something great and to build something awesome. Having the opportunity to feel myself as a candidate for office this year, a lot of people saw the political side of that. They saw the running, the ads, the momentum that we were able to build. But there was a lot behind that. There was a lot of pain. There was a lot of hurt. There was a lot of suffering. And I definitely feel the pain of others this year as well. So I want to offer some advice especially to all of the younger people out there that might be tuning in. The first thing I say is just never really give up. Because you never know how close you are to a goal. there were so many times this year that I wanted to give up. I wanted to quit what I was doing, whether that was in politics or in my personal life. And it just took a little bit of effort, a little bit of trying to stay focused and keep my eyes pierced to the goal. I saw that I could do so much more. And the hardest part of this year for me, and I take it for a lot of people, and I thank Lawrence for giving us a history of his people, for opening up a space of healing as well, because we all need a little bit of healing in our lives right now. We all need a little bit of light. And this year was particularly a tough year for a lot of us, especially the Black nation. And a lot of us who saw in our faces throughout this year so many people who lost their lives. Breonna Taylor, who will not be able to see, she didn't get to see the New Year's of 2020, and she won't be able to get to see 2021 as well. We lost George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery. We lost so many others, countless others. And we see the injustice in American society, unjust criminal justice system, unjust policing system in this country, and just so many. We saw in our faces this year the amount of people who didn't care, and we saw something that gives me a lot of hope, and that is the amount of people who do care. The amount of people who came out, who protested, who made signs, who tweeted or posted on Facebook, even the small stuff. It changed the world, really, and we saw the largest civil rights mobilization of people in the history of this country. And we saw, and the world saw, the United States of America, people in this country really stand up for what they believe in. And, it was tough this year watching all of this unfold. There was a lot of anger. I saw so many people throughout the country who were angry because they see that the system continues to oppress people. They see that nothing is likely to change in their lives, and they see the same harm continuing. And that wasn't just a anger. It was a lot of collective anger, but it was a lot of personal anger for myself as well. Seeing all of that as an African American, seeing that as a young person, see someone who looked like me being murdered, and half the country or a large group of people condoning that, and no justice being brought. So I felt anger as well. I felt a lot of anger, a lot of disappointment as well, and it was hard to try to channel all of that anger into a positive direction, because it was really personal. And I guess one of the pieces of advice I give people for this new year is to think about how many other people there are in the world who agree with you and who see the need for justice. That tends to make things a little bit better. You can't change everything, but when you know that there are millions of people everywhere, all across this country and all across this world, who are on your side, who are willing to fight with you, you see that you're not alone. So I offer that advice to everyone as well, to just channel all your anger into building something constructive. As Lawrence said, think about what you could do for yourself today. And think about what you could do for your family, as well as what you can do for others. When you wake up in the morning, think about what you could do for other people. It could be something small, it could be something big. But I think when we think about others, and when we use the might of our hearts to help others, things change, and we see that unfold in every single situation we try that in. And I want to take this opportunity to now talk a little bit about what this new year mean for the progressive movement and how we could move forward. I know we saw some really big some losses this year, but we saw some really big wins this year. And they weren't all electoral politics. We saw some Supreme Court wins, uh, wins with transgender rights in this country, and we need to, going forward, continue that fight, whether that's filling people for office, for public office, or just organizing in our own communities. The fight isn't over. We might have had an election this year, but as I always say, the work continues throughout elections and between elections. This work continues, so we have to continue that work going forward, because it is never never the end. And I'm saying this as a 21-year-old, someone who, didn't get the practice of politics, who isn't, trained and prepared by the establishment, who isn't taking money from big corporations. I say this as someone who, really, with working people in my community, built my own politics and my own future in that regard. It's going to be tough. And we saw a lot of losses this year. But you don't give up. You don't stray away from the goal. You keep the goal in sight, because again, history shows when things get the hardest, that means you're the closest to winning. You're the closest to achieving change. But this is an intersectional movement. We have to care about each other. We have to care about all of our different communities. We have to be willing to speak up for our women, speak up for our LGBT community, speak up for our indigenous communities who are under attack and who continue to be under attack throughout administrations, Democrat and Republican administrations. So we have to do that. But keep your eyes on the sight for this new year. I think 2021 is going to be an amazing year. We will not have everything go smooth and perfect, but I do have a lot of hope that we'll continue fighting, that we'll continue doing the right thing. As long as we're doing the right thing, then nothing can go wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Elijah. It's an honor to bring in the new year with you. Up next, I'm excited to have a conversation with progressive candidates Jen Perlman, Eva Putsova, Zina Spizakis, and Zainab Mohseni. These women made the Democratic establishment quake in their boots with their bold progressive campaigns in Florida, Arizona, New Jersey, and Virginia. Even though they weren't elected, the movement is indebted to their tireless activism and courageous work of these women. They paved the path forward for future progressive politics and activism. Without further ado, Jen, Eva, Zina, Zainab, Happy New Year, and thank you for joining us. You each work tirelessly to run honest, grassroots, progressive campaigns. I want to start off the conversation celebrating the impact each of you left on your communities. Jen, you ran to unseat Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, one of the Democratic Party's largest recipients of corporate donations from police PACs, private insurance companies, big sugar, payday lenders, and the fossil fuel industry. When you think back to your campaign work and the impact you left on Florida politics, what are you most proud of?
I think, we did a really good job here pushing the movement forward. And we talked about this the other day, but I'm really interested in that we're changing the paradigm of what a campaign is, because for me, it was always infinitely more than a means to the end. And the campaign, and this is something that's really important, and people need to understand this, even when you lose, the momentum and the movement keeps going. Like that's part of it. You're part of the process. And I really appreciated that. Like I appreciated being part of the process. I appreciated connecting different groups of people and building coalitions and just really creating a better sense of community, specifically for progressives in this area. But just in general, I just think it was such a positive experience in terms of just, I guess, really putting ourselves out there and really bringing in this ideal change and bringing in this idea of service as representation. And I think we did a good job of that. So, I mean, for me, that's why it was a really good experience.
Wonderful. Thank you. Eva, you made huge progressive strides at the city council level, passing a $15.50 minimum wage and climate action plan in your town. When you look back at your campaign to bring these changes to the federal arena, what part of your campaign for Congress are you most proud of?
Thank you, Alexandra, for having us here. Just like Jen said, being part of the process is what is most rewarding. Of course, individually, the whole 2020 has been incredibly productive. We've learned so much as individuals. But what it was, to me, really reassuring is that regardless what part of the district I was in, there were so many progressives and there were so many young people that really are done with politics as usual, and they are really done with this party structure that is supported by corporations. And so I see, my journey as absolutely necessary to keep the fire going, because we are heading toward progress. And to also give a big shout out to Flagstaff voters who 5 years ago passed, actually in 2016, so that was 4 years ago, passed that minimum wage initiative. And on January 1st, 2021, Flagstaff's minimum wage will go to $15, and then the following year to $15.50. And the same voters who support these progressive ideas, like raising the minimum wage, like universal health care, they are not people who who have strong feelings about party necessary. They actually truly believe that these are good policies for the people. And so I love being part of the process and holding the place for whoever comes next.
Thank you. Zena, you have been fighting climate change for years, starting in the private sector and then joining lobbyists and activists before taking the fight for our planet to Congress. When you think back on the fight for climate justice that you brought to the ballot boxes of the 9th District of New Jersey, what are you most proud of?
Gosh, there's so many things. I mean, I'll echo what Eva and Jen said, but when I look at our campaign, I was really proud and in awe of many of our volunteers, most of whom were born after our current incumbent actually got to office. These, I call them kids, they're young adults, but to me, they're kids. And these are the people, the volunteers, and my children are just, these are the folks that I was fighting for. Our campaign managed to sort of start a very nascent progressive movement here in the 9th District. There was never really much of a challenge to this, to my opponent. But it did basically bring together coalitions from Sunrise Hubs to Our Revolution Hubs to different groups, Food and Water Action, that came in and really shone a spotlight that our planet, right now we're at the point where the best we can do for climate change is to slow it down. We are at a point where we've lost our moment, unfortunately, to stop it and to try to reverse it. But right now, all we can do is slow it down significantly enough so that the next generation has an opportunity through science to start reversing some of the devastation. There's some things that we've lost. We're in the middle of the 6th mass extinction our planet has seen. We have accelerated it as a species, humans have, and that sort of that urgency was never really present, I think, in large parts of northern New Jersey. And I'm very proud of the fact that, a lot of our volunteers who did everything we couldn't have run a campaign without these folks, really brought a spotlight on it. In addition to, things like healthcare. Our district has the highest uninsured rates in the entire state of New Jersey, and yet, our opponent takes millions of dollars from big pharmaceuticals. Our district also had tremendous criminal justice issues, and yet our opponent was the top taker of police and police union money out of all 535 members of Congress. So, like Jen said, it's the destination, but it's also the journey. And when you run these progressive campaigns, and if they're strong, they can make changes, because for the first time, my opponent stopped voting with Republicans on police and criminal justice issues and started voting progressively, to the extent that he lost some of the biggest support from some of these unions in the state. So we did make a difference. And I'm very proud of the fact that our team was able to do that. So part of the journey. And run, if you're thinking about it.
Thank you. And last but not least, Zainab. Zainab, you ran in Northern Virginia, just on the outskirts of our nation's capital, to be our country's first Afghan-American congresswoman. When you reflect on your campaign's journey, what are you most proud of?
First of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's so great to spend my New Year's Eve with all you beautiful people and be among the progressive congressional candidates who know my experience so well. I think when I reflect back on our campaign, I'm proud of the fact that we were able to engage communities who are usually left behind. So like Zina said, younger people are left out of the political discourse, people of color. So we focused a lot of our energy there, and we truly wanted to run a grassroots, people-centered campaign, and we really, really stuck to that. And I think that bring light to the fact that these progressive ideologies and are not just campaign slogans, that people are supporting this. Their majority of people support initiatives like Medicare for All or the Green New Deal, because it's not some novel idea that we came up with. There are people who support these ideologies. So I'm proud to have engaged a community of people who have been activists and organizers on the ground and have advocated for these issues, and to bring that to be a part of the quote unquote mainstream political conversation is something that I reflect on a lot, and I'm very proud of that.
Thank you. Each election season, progressive candidates learn from the successes and struggles of those who paved the way before them. What was the most valuable advice you received? Let's go in reverse order this time. Zainab, do you want to start us off?
The most valuable advice, I think, being honest with who we were as a campaign and like sticking to our values, I think was something that we practiced and got from a lot of like activists and organizers. I think that a lot of people who are in politics are looking for the next thing up, and I think it becomes a little bit diluted, and you can see that in a lot of politicians, that they're so worried about their career and re-election that they lose sight of the fact that they're public servants and their job is to serve the public and do what is for the best interest of the public. And I think that was one of the best advice that I got from not politicians, but organizers and activists and people who advocate for this throughout their lifetime, that we need to have a set of values and stick to those. And some of them are not very politically convenient and hurt politicians and hurt candidates. But at the end of the day, our job and our aspiration is to be public servants, and that we need to stick to those values.
Thank you. Zina, do you want to go next?
Yeah. So, so two pieces of advice from two different people. First, on a sort of very practical level, with respect to running a campaign, start canvassing early, especially if you're, you've never run or you don't have any name recognition in the district. And the other one is I'm going to try to quote a friend of mine said, the pessimist sees difficulty and opportunity, and the optimist sees opportunity and difficulty. And running a progressive campaign, especially since we don't take any corporate money, we don't what I call corporate bribes. It's particularly difficult. So I think that running a campaign will force you to a progressive campaign will force you to be very creative, and and that's good because it really hones your skills. For the next person who runs, or if you decide to run again.
Thank you. Eva, do you want to give your most valuable piece of advice?
Sure. This advice actually, and I don't know whether it's an advice, but Tom Hayden, who actually died in 2016, and you probably, a lot of people know him as a great progressive politician from California. He once told me that when you win, you start to lose. And I've been thinking about that a lot in terms of the reverse. When you lose, that you also have this great opportunity to do other things and win on other fronts. And so, in terms of the campaign, other advice that I got that I really appreciated was just to stay focused. There are so many distractions, and you are sometimes you feel like you should attend a lot of events, and depending on what context, what district you are in, oftentimes these events are attended by the same people, and so you have to be careful with how you spend your time. So being focused and staying authentic and unafraid. So those were some of the things that people told me and that I appreciated, but I always reflect on those words that Tom Hayden shared with me years ago, that I think are important for us. Obviously we are here because we lost. I don't know if we would, I hope we would be here if we won, but I see success in that.
Thank you. And finally, Jen, what was the most valuable advice you received? Oh, you're muted.
Okay, I wish I had something really, really profound. I will say this, the one piece of advice that I kept in the back of my head from the very, very beginning, and is, are we allowed to say a curse word? Are we allowed to do that?
Yeah.
Not monetized, was don't step in shit. And to me, as somebody who is more and more realizing about what it's like being a public person, that is very important. Even though you often want to, just don't step in it. You know what I mean? Like that to me, as far as politically, like what you need to do. But when it comes to running a campaign, trust your gut. Trust your gut, because nobody knows you and what's going to be best for you and your district. And it's just, I think that a lot of times we worry too much about what consultants might say or what different people that are, experts. And sometimes that's really important. It is, like there's certain things, but when your gut is telling you something, that's the most important thing that you have. And so that would be what I would like, that I picked up the most.
Okay, thank you. The next question is just for Jen and Zena. Jen first, who is your progressive activist role model and why?
Oh my God, a progressive activist role model. I have actually, let me think. I could do a congressional role model. Is that, I'm trying to think of like an activist person.
Sure, that's fine.
Katie Porter's my fave. I like her the most. I think that watching her, and this is as from a litigator's perspective, like watching her question Steve Mnuchin was glorious. It gave me all the good feels. So I really dig her. Activists, it's hard because it's just, there's so many people. And really, it's interesting that you started this with something Indigenous, because I generally love all things Indigenous. It could be any continent, anything. Like, I love that. And one of the best things I learned, and it was from the Dakota Sioux, by the way, I went to this nonviolent resistance training. So I wouldn't say a particular one activist, but it was a group, and it was the Lakota Sioux that came down to do this here. And that was extremely inspirational. So I wouldn't necessarily say a person, but just that the tribal resilience and the way that the nonviolent training that they did, like, just that to me is extremely special. So I would say more a people than a person would be my activist idol.
I definitely agree with that. And Zena, who's your progressive activist role model and why?
So there's a few. I mean, obviously, I didn't get politically active until I was inspired by Bernie Sanders. Quite frankly, I mean, I think a lot of us could probably say that. And when I think I know he's a senator, but I kind of view him as an activist too. Sort of more specifically, when I think about the climate movement, there's a few standouts there. There's people like Bill McKibben. There are the kids who are part of the lawsuit suing the United States for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, basically suing the United States. I forget the exact title of the lawsuit, but they're basically telling the U.S. government, you haven't protected our future because you've allowed these corporations and these oil companies to knowingly destroy our planet. And then there's obviously, I'm always very inspired by Greta Thunberg. She is, just a very, very powerful young woman, because she's, it's really interesting. I mean, I think there's a lot of young people who are getting involved in the climate movement, maybe just progressive politics in general, who I think are at a point where they've got nothing to lose, right? And so they're not holding back, right? What they say or how, or what they do or how they behave. And I think that could be, I think that's very inspiring. I know it's inspired me. It's inspired my own young children when we've seen some of these activists, but there's a few out there. So.
Thank you. Since the last question was for Jen and Zena, the next question is just for Eva and Zainab. Eva first, the restrictions of COVID-19 made grassroots outreach uniquely difficult. Despite the hurdles, what was your favorite interaction with a constituent on the campaign trail?
I have to say that probably thanks to COVID-19 and because we were forced to stay at home, our campaign was able to focus. The congressional district where I ran is one of the largest in the country. It's like 10th largest. And it's extremely taxing to drive from one place to another. It takes 8 hours from north to south. So the fact that we were forced to kind of operate from our homes, we were, I believe, able to connect with probably way more people. I mean, we were on the phone constantly. We had volunteers, actually. We started the campaign in 2019 in January, and from February of 2019, we've had several times a week for the first year, volunteers calling voters. So I didn't know that I love to talk on the phone, but I really like to talk on the phone. And so that was my favorite way to connect with people. The time is so limited, and these 2 years, that as taxing as they were very productive in terms of number of people that we reached. And parts because we have Navajo Nation, which is the largest tribe in the United States, is in our district. And, the coverage, whether it's cell phone coverage, whether it's internet access, essentially all infrastructure is very underdeveloped there. And so it's very difficult to connect with Indigenous people. And I'm sure it's the same elsewhere. However, we were able, before COVID, attend, great fairs and flea markets. And I was able to visit with people and really appreciate the diversity that Indigenous people, just because they have similar history, doesn't mean that politically they are the same. And I think that sometimes we make these assumptions about people that what they believe in. And so I appreciate those interactions, and those were great experiences.
Thank you. Zainab, what was your favorite interaction with a constituent on the campaign trail?
Gosh, there's so many. I think that I received a lot of messages from first-time voters, and I remember delivering a sign to somebody who had just turned 18, and they were voting for the first time ever, and they were just so excited to see a person who's not a white man, who's not like an older white man, run in this district. And just like so many of us, our representatives are people who have been there for ages. And when we think of politicians, we generally think of older white men. So that was my favorite, to see so many people cast their vote for the first time for somebody that their value that represented their values, and they felt like they were I guess they were seeing somebody who looked like them or who had similar values and similar experiences to them, be somebody who runs for office.
Yeah. Thank you. The next question is posed to everyone, whomever feels like they have an answer. For decades, voter suppression, gerrymandering, and voter disenfranchisement have been used as tools to perpetuate the establishment political machine, consolidating power amongst politicians detached from the struggles of working-class Americans. To anyone who wants to answer, why do you think voters are disengaged, and how can we energize and expand the progressive base in the future?
I mean, I'll take a stab at that, only because New Jersey's got its own set of very interesting election. So just as by way of background, New Jersey is the only state that has a ballot that is designed in columns and in rows. And that design is basically controlled by party bosses. So those bosses put their desired candidate, their selected candidates, in places where they're likely to get voted in. And in the last 50 years, no incumbent has ever lost their election here in New Jersey. And while just in 2020, we saw 8 incumbents lose around the country. That has had a really sort of deleterious effect, I think, here in New Jersey politics, because there's a lot of people that are they're just checked out, right? They are just like, why bother, right? I know, the line's there. Nobody else is going to ever challenge them. And anybody who runs for office here in New Jersey, and I think a lot of my fellow progressives who ran here in the state will echo this. We were all told, oh, don't bother running. You're never going to get over the line, right? But that isn't capitulating is not a solution, right? And I think that voter I kind of see it as a form of sort of voter suppression, because when incumbents haven't lost in 50 years in New Jersey, there's a problem, right? What that has done is you've got districts like mine that have high uninsured rates, that have Superfund polluted sites. I mean, toxic sites here that the EPA has to come in and clean. Just problem after problem. Police brutality issues, and your incumbent is voting with Republicans and still taking pharma money. A lot of people just get checked out. But I think what the power is of a progressive is, we come in there, and I don't know if it's naivete or what, but we really, we live our values, right? And we're not embarrassed to talk about our values, and we're fighting for people, right? Because a lot of the times we or our families have been struggling as well. And so when you see a progressive coming in, I think that really does energize segments of the population. I think, starting with like sort of younger segments of the population, and then just sort of working its way up. I think that at least that's what was our experience here. But I think you kind of have to, if you see voter suppression, obviously you have to try to fix that, right? And we're trying to fix that issue. There's a bunch of progressive organizations trying to fix that issue here in New Jersey, but you also have to put up alternatives, because people just need to understand that there are alternatives. And even if you don't win the first or second time, at some point, we're going to start changing politics here. We're going to have representatives and elected officials that are more responsive to the needs of our districts, and that are held accountable, frankly. And that's, it's accountability. And, like Jen said, I think earlier, it is the journey. And even just having a progressive movement in the district will force change on an incumbent, whether they're sort of a corporate Democrat or whatever, because the only thing that politicians fear are money and votes. And once you start, we can start shifting the dial on that vote part of that equation, they get scared.
I can take a stab at this too. I think just to echo some of what Zena said, is just like a lot of people don't see themselves represented in our politicians. I think that there is a lot of change happening at the local level and at the state level, but not a lot of change happening within our Congress. And I think, again, it's so much about performativity and partyism that politicians lose sight of what their job is actually supposed to be. And I think don't represent the issues that impact people like us, like student loans and, the Green New Deal, the Medicare for All and things like that, even though they are popular ideologies among the public, politicians don't represent that and care so much more about their corporate donors or people, be it oil companies, be it the military industrial complex, be it the police unions. I think so much focus is on their reelection, their campaign donations. And I think somebody earlier said this is more like a corporate bribe. And that's exactly what it is just you are accountable to the people that pay for your campaign. And I think there's not a lot of effort from either party to engage people who are younger. There's no sort of effort to register people to vote. There's active disenfranchisement of formerly incarcerated people who tend to be majority Black and brown people. And I think there's benefit in that. So much of politicians focus on the comfort level of white people and how they vote. And you see this so much in the Democratic Party that, you know, progressives who serve more of the general public, and they are so much more concerned about the potential Republicans who might change their mind and hopefully vote for us, and who tend to be middle and upper class white people, that politicians and the Democrats, who are supposed to be, I guess, like the better, in my opinion, don't really focus on communities and don't engage them, because there is benefit for the incumbents of either party to keep the structure as it is, because change will engage more people. If we talk about issues that impact the daily lives of the working class, of the low income, the uninsured, the communities like Flint who are drinking poisoned water, then people are going to come out and vote, and incumbents are going to lose. And I think there's so much like benefit for the establishment to keep it as is, that they don't. So it's the cyclical approach that people, neither of the parties engage these people, and there's not enough engagement, so they stay in power, which is disappointing.
Okay, thank you. So for our next question, and this can be to everyone as well, whomever would like to answer, what were some unexpected hurdles you faced as an insurgent campaign?
You mean besides COVID?
That you can run with that.
Okay. All right, can we just assume that's across the board? I think that, is it okay if I just go? Is that okay? Is that cool? We anticipated being ghosted. We anticipated being blackballed by our local DEC. We anticipated most of how we would get treated here. But I think that the worst part is when the left eats their own. And I think that what's really upsetting is even within what's so-called the progressive movement. I think that what was hardest is when you're walking on eggshells and dealing with like the social justice people and cancel culture, and having to deal with that within your own people when you're in fact pushing for the same policy. That was unexpected. Like that, we expected it from the other side, but I didn't expect it from our own as much as we got it. And I'd also say the blackout of labor. I mean, and we talked about that a little bit the other day, but yeah, so we had some issues with that too, also just very political. But yeah, when the left eats their own, to me, it's the worst.
So I'll go second. There were a few things that I didn't quite expect. I mean, I didn't expect Democratic Party to embrace my candidacy, but I didn't expect the level of disrespect. For example, I called the party chair, the state party chair, before I announced running for Congress, just out of courtesy to let her know this is what I was going to do. And she never returned my call. When my campaign was over, I didn't receive a single call from the Democratic Party leadership, just to say thank you for being part of this process. This is what democracy is about. And I think this is problematic. I think it's part of the culture. Obviously, this is the approach they choose to not even acknowledge you, that you exist as a candidate. And we have to realize that we are not necessarily just candidates as people, but we represent a faction of voters. We represent communities. And so I didn't expect them to be so non-strategic about the way they would I guess, not communicate with us. So that was, and also, I was surprised by some, I guess maybe unfriendliness from women on the campaign, from women who were very much connected to the corporate party and who essentially don't even care who is elected as long as it's a Democrat. And, on one hand, we hear this, this language about empowering women, but the moment you are politically inconvenient, that whole language of empowerment and that encouragement goes away. And so we have to be very careful when it comes to identity politics, whether it's gender, whether it's racial, to realize that our politics are a threat to some of these, some of the people who hold power. And those were things that I perhaps didn't expect.
Thank you. Okay. So now to wrap up the panel part of our evening, it's been incredible getting to talk to you all and celebrate the legacy each of you carry into 2021. On a final note, looking towards the future, what is your 2021 resolution? What exciting plans do you have for your own activism and personal journey in the new year? Zena, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, so it's sort of activism with a very sort of practical perspective. So obviously, I started this. I'm a progressive, and I'm coming at it from the Green New Deal, the environmental angle. I was thinking about this over the last week. I'm like, what am I going to do differently this year? I'm going to, from a sort of business perspective, because I work in clean energy, I'm going to redouble my efforts to drop the prices of renewables so low that fossil fuels will go extinct faster than British Petroleum or Exxon or Shell or anybody else thinks that they're going to. Right now, we have huge projects, offshore wind, onshore wind right now is cheaper than the most efficient natural gas plant. It's going to take not only wind, it's going to take solar, it's going to take hydrogen, it's going to take a whole bunch of different technologies. And whether it's, directing funding towards these companies or whatever else I need to do, I'm going to start dropping it because for me to wait on a politician to do the right thing is going to my children will not have a future that way. And let's face it, I'll leave this with everyone as I, thank you for all this, but a lot of Democrats are climate delayers. And in my book, a climate delayer is worse than a climate denier, because even though you admit that there is a crisis, you have delayed so long that you have missed critical points in the amount of carbon that is contained in our atmosphere where we could have actually reversed it. And that more than anything else infuriates me, because you knew and you still let it happen. And I'll be damned if I'm going to see my children inherit a planet that they can't thrive on. So that's what I'm going to do next year.
I'm looking forward to seeing the incredible work you do in 2021. And thank you for joining us tonight. Eva, would you like to go next? What your New Year's resolution is?
Sure. So a few weeks ago, I and my former communications director founded a Catch Fire movement. You can check it out at catchfiremovement.org. And it's an organization to help progressive leaders to catch fire early. And Jen actually is part of the advisory board, as are other 8 former congressional candidates and other progressive activists. And our goal is to make it possible for progressive working people from marginalized backgrounds to lead. We all talk about wanting working people to run for offices and to represent us, but how can working people step away from their jobs, from their careers, to run, let's say, campaigns for 2 years, or to run a ballot measure campaign, or to start their social enterprise that would do good, right? And so we want to be able to provide personal grants to make it feasible, financially, practically feasible for working progressives to lead. We also want to create a community of progressive leaders who can learn and support each other. We also plan to provide coaching, which is so important. When you're running a campaign, or when you're running an initiative, or when you're starting your own nonprofit, the road to leadership is oftentimes very lonely, and you have to make decisions that is so great if you have somebody to help you, to take you through the journey of making decisions. And then finally, we want to also create a community of progressive talent. Those of us that ran campaigns, we had fantastic volunteers, but it's also a reality that we've lived, that we didn't have always the progressive talent at our disposal to work with. And so, I hope people will check us out at catchfiremovement.org and support us, because our agenda is ambitious, and I want to help other progressive leaders to actually enjoy this journey, because it's so important that we have progressives to stay in the movement even when the campaigns are over, and to make it possible for them to catch fire early.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And it was great getting the chance to talk to you tonight. Zainab, any exciting plans or resolutions as we head into the new year?
Yeah, I want to work more on being active in communities of color. Like I said before, I think usually Black and Brown communities are disenfranchised from the political discourse, and I want to create an organization that focuses more on creating political power, similar to what Ava is working on, is to build an organization that works on voter information, voter education, but focuses mainly on communities of color and getting them involved politically.
Awesome. And last but not least, Jen, what exciting plans do you have for your own activism and personal journey in the new year?
Oh, we've been busy. So this is the set of our podcast, Generational Change, which our mission is transforming politics into service. And on a local level, my organization is GenCore, and we are now officially being able to accept donations. And we are a core group of volunteers that is just very active locally, but trying really to encourage other campaigns to spawn these types of movements, because it's really it's important to keep it going, not just during campaign season. I think that's something that's a big mistake that people make, is they're just active during campaign season. And that, unfortunately, is not really serving our needy communities. So our goal is to keep that concept going year round. And then with Generational Change, if people subscribe, it's always something educational. It's also sometimes fun. We do live streams, and I often interview people that do things that are really interesting to me. So we have a whole bunch of episodes that are already up. But it could be something like, I read a book that I find really interesting, so then I want to interview the author. And so there's a bunch of that kind of stuff up there. But just doing our best to keep pushing forward, educating, and bringing more and more people into volunteering and getting involved. And I think when people see politics as service, it's infinitely more enticing to the quality of people that we want to get involved. So that's sort of what our mission is.
Wonderful. Thank you. Everyone, that was former progressive congressional candidates Jen Perlman, Eva Putsova, Zina Spizakis, and Zainab Mohseni. Thank you, each of you, for the activism, organizing, and campaigning you dedicated to the progressive movement. I'm inspired by the compassionate and uncompromising ethic you bring to your fight for change. For more information on Eva and Jen's work with Catch Fire, you can click on the link in the comments section. I look forward to working alongside each of you in the future fight for progress. Happy New Year to all of you. Up next, with few words of encouragement and a toast to the new year of progressive advocacy, is political activist and campaign organizer Tim Sanders.
Hi.
Hi, Tim.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here, pleased to be here. I feel in a way that You could have called any one of hundreds or thousands of activists, volunteer organizers all across this country. And I've met many of them in the past year and a half. It's been an exciting year to be a volunteer, to be an activist, and to be an organizer, and to work with these wonderful candidates who we just saw speaking. I just think it's, despite everything that's happened, it's a great time to be alive. Before I get to the toast, I want to make a brief plug for a couple of initiatives I've been working on and will be working on in the next year. The first is PDPR, it's People for Democratic Party Reform, which is working on some really innovative ways to really transform the party. They've had some success in the past year. As you know, there's 50 state parties, more than 50 parties. And we encourage everyone to join us, and we'll be having some training and some other exciting things happening this year. It's at pdpr.org, and I'll be dropping these links in the chat later. And the other one is the Progressive Book Club. We've been meeting every month and discussing really interesting books and ideas about the progressive movement. The one coming up in January, on January 14th, is this book, The Deficit Myth. And we will have the honor and pleasure of having the author of the book, Stephanie Kelton, in our book club meeting. So everyone is welcome to join us there. And on February 11th, we're going to be discussing Politics for Power by Ethan Hirsch. This book is about how to move beyond political hobbyism and take action and make real change. And by the way, the deficit myth, for those who aren't familiar with MMT, it's about modern monetary theory and the birth of a people's economy in our country. So yeah, 2020 has been quite a year, and I want to get to 2021 in a second, but I think it's worth thinking about how we've been confronted in the country has been confronted in such a real and direct way with so many things in our society that have always been there. They've been there in plain sight for people who want to see, who want to look. But it seems like in 2020, this curtain has been lifted, and in many ways. And I'll just give a couple of examples. One of them is the way that so many people in our country and in our government have never really acknowledged or talked about the dignity and the courage of the people who are really driving this country. It's always been true. These people are the pillars of our economic and our social life. They literally provide us with food. They keep us healthy. They keep us alive. It just didn't seem so clear before who the essential people are, the workers of our country. And it's always been there in sight, but we just haven't been able to see it. And 2020 has really brought that into focus. It's also the year 2020 in which we saw 8 minutes and 46 seconds of tragedy and horror, and it showed the nation what has always really been there, because we've been pretending. People have been talking a good game, talking about racism as a bygone relic. But if people somehow couldn't see it, we've been confronted with the words of William Faulkner when he said, "The past is never dead, it's not even past." And in 2020, it's clear more than ever that this supposed relic is actually the operational and conceptual structure of the system that we have, a system of injustice and inequality. So these things have always been there in plain sight to those who can see. And 2020 has brought them into sharp focus and given us renewed clarity in these areas, in so many areas. And this is where we are on the eve of the next year and really of the next decade. We're here together to say that this new year, 2021, will be a year of a new vision. We're here together to resolve and to pledge that this new year and this whole decade is going to be a year and a decade where we imagine a new vision of our society and of our government and of our communities. And we're here to agree and to pledge that, as we have done over this past year, we're going to continue to support each other with a new energy and a renewed sense of purpose, and keep fighting for justice and for love and for freedom and equality, and keep fighting for our families and our friends and our communities, and ultimately to keep fighting for that which draws us together, which has brought us together here tonight, which I think is our love of justice, of fairness, of equality, and our love and our hope for our country. So friends, sisters and brothers, and I don't have to tell you this, but it is not you and it is not me, but it is us. It is us who in this coming year and in this coming decade, it is us who will hold hands together across our great country. Because it is us, and it's not someone else's country, it's our country. And it's not someone else's government, it's our government. And it's not someone else's streets, it's our streets. And it is us who are going to join hands. And as our sister Nina says, with these hands, we will join with many more hands, with yet more hands across this great country of ours. So my friends, here's to the lovers, and here's to the fighters, and here's to a 2021 with a new vision and a new energy. Here's to us.
Thank you, Tim. Today marks the anniversary of the first coronavirus cases in China. 20 days later, the United States faced its first coronavirus case as well. Despite this, our federal government failed to prepare for the virus and failed to protect its most vulnerable communities, instead spewing conspiracy theories, fake news, and even questioning science as a whole. The results were disastrous. Thousands of Americans lost jobs, millions sickened, our economy collapsed, and devastatingly of all, 341,000 people have died to date. We did not deserve a year of so much grief. The pandemic exposed the infrastructure of our government, revealing corruption and motives married to greed. We saw institutes treat people as disposable, sending people to the front line without proper PPE or knowledge of COVID symptoms or the virus's mechanisms of spread. We watched simple mitigation tactics like hand washing, mask wearing, and distancing become controversial and politicized, with our leadership refusing to lead by example. This past Tuesday marked the deadliest day in United States history, with 3,725 people dying in one day. The US remains the nation most struck by the pandemic, accounting for more than 18% of deaths globally. The virus ravaged through our most vulnerable communities, wreaking havoc on Navajo Nation, the working class who could not afford or were not given the option to stay home, and BIPOC communities who have faced worsening health disparities over the years due to neglect and dismissal from the medical community. We saw our loved ones dying alone in hospitals over FaceTime, unclaimed bodies being dumped into mass graves, and our healthcare providers going on strike for better working conditions as more and more has been demanded of them. This has been the loneliest year in our history as we struggle to recover from the abandonment of our governance in our time of need. Yet we discovered we are not alone. As people realized our government was not coming to help us, we turned to each other, sharing resources and protesting both in the streets and digitally that Black Lives Matter and we would no longer silently comply with an equitable system. We turned out in mass numbers to vote in the most important election of our lifetime, realizing we have the power to change things. Come 2021, we must hold our leadership accountable. Policy decisions directly impact our lives, and the people making those decisions need to start thinking of us and meeting our needs. We must pressure our representatives for policies like Medicare for all, dignified federal jobs, and relief money to carry us out of this crisis. We must address the mistrust of our Black communities have in our medical community in the wake of the Tuskegee trials and reinforce the necessity for widespread distribution of the coronavirus vaccine, especially to our most vulnerable populations. Most importantly, we need to continue to show up in numbers to protest and vote in order to move the country in a direction we determine. We are not disposable, and this is our time. With our numbers, our new normal can be shaped by our vision. Take a moment to recognize how important you are to this vision. We need you. We need you to show up. 2020 was a grief-stricken year, but 2021 is the time for the people's revolution. Let's hit the ground running. Up next is Progressive Campaign Manager and founding co-chair of Done Waiting, Akshita Verma. Akshita managed Salman Rajput's groundbreaking campaign for Michigan's 12th congressional district. Since the primary, Akshita and Salman capitalized in their campaign's energetic base to found Done Waiting, an organization that mobilizes young volunteers from across the country to phone bank for progressive candidates and advocacy. Akshita, Happy New Year's.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for the introduction. So hi everyone, my name is Akshita. I am one of the co-founders of Done Waiting, which is a federal PAC that we started in September. You can just go to donewaiting.org to check us out. We're just a PAC that focuses on progressive issues and getting progressive candidates elected. So yeah, I really want to spend this time here talking about the positives that we as progressive organizers have really been able to achieve in 2020. As we've already talked about, 2020 has been such a horrible year for everybody. But in the face of everything that we have seen, progressive organizers have really risen to the challenge. And I have to say, I'm really proud of everything we've accomplished. We've had progressives run for Congress and really make an impact. We've had people start orgs, people start PACs, and we had so much anger and so much energy to tap into, and we really turned something amazing, or made something amazing out of it. So that's what I really want to talk to you guys about today. So yeah, I helped co-found Done Waiting, a federal PAC, back in September. And even though we just launched, we already have over 200 interns who are spending 6 hours a week phone banking, and we've already accomplished a lot of great things. We endorsed Adam Christensen for Congress in Florida, and he lives in a really red district, and we really turned out the Democratic vote there and really made a huge impact. Now we have already talked to 13,000 people in Georgia, telling them to help us flip the Senate blue, which is really, really exciting. And we're already looking forward to what we're going to do in the future after the Georgia election. And I'm just really honestly so proud of my team and Solomon for making something so amazing. Done Waiting has been so exciting. We've really created a really exciting space for activists and young people to join and intern and learn about their beliefs and learn how to be activists and learn how to organize. And the model for our org, a model that I'm really proud of. We actually started back when I was a campaign manager for Solomon Rajput for U.S. Congress. And I want to talk a little bit about that because I think we can all really learn about the future of digital organizing. So Solomon was running for Congress in Michigan in District 12, and we were up against, an establishment candidate, an establishment family, really. This family had held this one congressional seat for almost 90 years now, millions of dollars in corporations. And though we weren't able to win, we actually created the largest congressional campaign in the country. We had over 400 interns phone banking 8 hours a week for months. And we really took advantage of digital organizing during the pandemic in order to do this. So before the pandemic, we were canvassing, knocking doors. We knocked a ton of doors. But after COVID hit, we really took advantage of recruiting on social media, and we recruited over 400 people. We made over 300,000 calls without any corporate money, without a dialer. And it's just something that we transferred over to Done Waiting. And we did that through TikTok. I know TikTok is a newer app that a lot of people don't even use yet. But during COVID, a lot of young people's schools, high schools and colleges were canceled. People lost internships, people lost jobs. And so people were at home and we couldn't canvass, we couldn't knock doors. And so people are just spending so much time on social media. And our advantage as progressive organizers is organizing, whether it's physical or now digital. Because as we know, the DNC establishment candidates, they don't know how to organize. They have money, as we saw from Bloomberg's presidential campaign. They're willing to spend that money, but even if you spend millions of dollars, that doesn't mean you're going to win. That doesn't mean you're going to get the vote. So as progressives, we really got to get those conversations going with people. And so that's what we did. We used TikTok to recruit young people who were at home and wanted something to do. And now we're doing the same thing with Done Waiting, and we're creating so much momentum, so much energy from young activists. And it's just really exciting to see. And I know, especially when we were running for Congress, we encountered a lot of people in the establishment, especially, who were like, oh, like a congressional candidate using TikTok, that's so unprofessional. Like, how are you going to get votes? But as progressives, we're already on the vanguard, of the party. We have to push the envelope. We don't have corporate money. We have to be creative. And that's what we did. We were so successful. I've been so excited to see all the young people who've been wanting to join. And all you got to do is create an org that has a really robust infrastructure that can handle hundreds of people. We have an HR department, we have a field department, and we created a Discord server for all of our interns to talk to each other in, so they can make friends online, and they phone bank together in teams, they make friends. And that's just the one thing I've learned, is that throughout all this horrible 2020, if you create an organization where people can make friends and talk about their views, and someone in Michigan is phone banking with someone in California to call someone in Georgia, and suddenly you have all these young people making friends, talking about political memes. Everyone's working together to meet the same goal, but at the same time, it's a fun environment. And just creating that is so important, because activism can be so intimidating for people who don't know what the difference between a centrist and a leftist is. A lot of people don't know what their views are when they're young in high school and they want to join activism. So all you got to do is create that space for people to learn and grow. And that's what we've done. And I think that's what we as progressives can do in the future. And it's something that I want to be able to share with everybody on this call, and also everybody watching. So if you go to donewaiting.org, not only can you apply in like 30 seconds to join our org and become an intern, you can email us and contact us, and just talk about how we can build a progressive movement together and really tap into all of the energy that is out there, especially in the generation younger than all of us. Everybody is so excited and wants to get involved. And after this horrible year, people are angry. And it's our job as organizers to take that anger and take that energy and turn it into something tangible, like 100,000 phone calls, 10,000 emails, 20,000 door knocks. We can do that. And it's something I've been really excited about, and something I'm excited to take into the future. And I know it's been a horrible year, but in terms of organizing, I'm just so optimistic about 2021. Because we know that as progressives, we can out-organize anybody. We can out-organize Republicans, we can out-organize the DNC, and that's where our advantage is. And we're not afraid to try to get a viral TikTok or a viral tweet to get our message out there, because then you get phone bankers and text bankers who are willing to volunteer their time for you. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on this call. I just want to let everybody know that it has been a horrible year, but we'll get through it together through organizing and creating amazing things and amazing orgs, and by working together and creating a united front. So thank you so much for having me on this call. This has been amazing. I've had a ton of fun. And yeah, I'm excited to get the message out there.
Thank you so much, Akshita. And happy New Year's. Up next is a pre-recorded toast from former congressional candidate Lauren Ashcraft, who ran in the 12th District of New York.
Hi everyone, it's Lauren Ashcraft. I, just like you, am so excited and so relieved to move on from 2020. Happy New Year, happy 2021. And one of the things that we should all do as soon as the clock strikes midnight is start thinking about how we can all work together. And we need to come together to bring relief to the people who need it, to make sure that we're fighting for criminal justice reform, that we're fighting for a country that is home to all of us, not just a place where we can exist, but a home where we can all thrive. We need to tax the rich. We need to make sure that we have a social safety net to catch us whenever we fall, to catch us the next time we have a pandemic. We need to come together. That will happen in 2021. I hope you have a happy, safe, and healthy New Year. Thank you.
That was former candidate Lauren Ashcraft. And next we have another pre-recorded toast from Rachel Ventura.
Hi, my name is Rachel Ventura, and I ran for Congress in the 11th Congressional District. I'm a progressive Democrat and an advocate of the Green New Deal, Medicare for All, and shrinking the wealth inequalities in America. I'm wishing each and every one of you a Happy New Year, and I hope that 2021 brings much change. If not, remember this election right around the corner, 2022. Here we come, baby. Happy New Year.
So that concludes the night. Thank you again to all of our guests, and thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. May 2021 bring you hope and inspiration to affect change in your own communities, and cheers to a 2021 full of progress. Have a good rest of your evening.